Correct. So I know a lot about health and medical, and I know a fair amount about transportation. So let's hope, though, that you don't try to make it difficult. So I want to thank you for the invitation, but more importantly, I want to tell you a little bit about our department and also let you know two things. One, we're primarily a safety regulation authority, so we're responsible for ticket and click it. Everybody knows about that. And a little bit more about hands-free driving. We're also responsible for that. But you can't blame me about the availability of blue corn chips on certain airlines, because I'm here to tell you that flight crews are there to evacuate you, not to serve you snacks. So that's number one. And number two is we don't own anything, with the exception of 3 little planes that, oh, by the way, belong to the FAA, not our secretary. We really can regulate you to death, but I can't give you as many things as Herbie has. But that's why we work really well together, because I know where the Herbies are in every one of the states and territories, and we can reach out and touch them. So under the National Response Framework, everybody's supposed to know what position they play on the team. For Department of Transportation, we're here to help with ESF1 transportation, but we also provide some support to some of the other functions. And I've highlighted the ones that we touch, so for example, energy, emergency management, some of the others. Under ESF1, we're responsible for working with FEMA at the time of an event to make sure that all of the transportation needs are coordinated. But what that means generally is we use mechanisms that are already in place to be able to make things happen the way that they have to. But it's not just our crew that moves across from the Navy Yard over to the NRCC over at C Street. It's all of the people that we have out in the field. And I think these are the folks that are probably most helpful to you, because there is a secretary's designee in each one of the regions. That's the high-level person that's likely to go to the regional coordination center. We have transportation representatives. Those are more boots on the ground, Herbie types of people that actually will maybe be at the regional coordination center or down at the JFO, the Joint Field Office level. And then more importantly, we have about 200 people that are placed around the country that are part of our cadre. They've been trained in multiple areas, and we have the ability to move somebody from the West Coast to the East Coast or back and forth as we need them. These people come from the various operating administrations or subject matter experts in their area, but as well as how to make the system work. So, in the times of an actual event, we can use our regulatory authorities and provide some level of waiver. But waiver, remember, is for safety, so we don't want to do it for a whole lot of time. So for example, if you're trying to move cargo in, we can perhaps waive the amount of time a driver can be behind the wheel so that they can drive a little bit longer, get a little bit closer. We have a hazardous materials group, part of our pipeline and hazardous materials folks. We have requirements about putting hazardous materials into the transportation system. Sometimes we can be a little more lenient or do things that aren't entirely expected. So for example, when we had anthrax on Capitol Hill, we had to suddenly get rid of desks and chairs and big bulky things. Our material handling requirements mean a lot of padding and a lot of boxes and a lot of different things. In that instance, we came up with a safe way to move the stuff to a destruction area, but didn't necessarily go through all of the kinds of pieces that would normally happen if you were only talking about a slide or a vial of blood. Does that make sense? We have an emergency relief docket out of Railroads Administration, and then we have oversize and overweight is actually a state-regulated capacity, but what we will do is turn around and go back down to our state partners and negotiate something that's mutually beneficial for everyone. Assets and capabilities, probably a couple of things that you don't know about. I thought I would just let you know. So our Maritime Administration actually has a ready reserve force, and during Hurricane Sandy, we brought ships into New York so that we could put responders on them to billet and eat. So that kind of took some of the heat off from the city that was underwater. It was a great way to be able to do that. And for Federal Aviation Administration, again, another example, we have something called the Washington Flight Program. It's just a spot where we can bring VIPs in and out, outside of the usual system. We used that during Sandy when we had to move people rapidly around. And there are mobile air navigation services. Those are the portable towers and the personnel to support them that we can move across the country. Now, one of the things about air traffic controllers is that they're actually trained on the geography that they work in, so you can't necessarily take somebody from Burlington, Vermont and put them in San Diego. It just doesn't work. So, heard a lot today about the National Disaster Recovery Framework, and we are also a partner. We fall under critical infrastructures and work with the Corps of Engineers closely to be able to do that. Here are the areas that have been talked about a lot today, and as you can see, we're a primary for critical infrastructure, but we support a couple of the others. So I think one of the things that's probably hard to kind of wrap your arms around is that it really is a continuum. So when we're doing something, for example, with FEMA under the Stafford Act, as long as you get a mission assignment, then the dollars to fund that activity come from FEMA. It's pretty much a no-brainer. As long as you go through the right gaps, do the right coordination, get the right paperwork, eventually the money will show up. Not quite so easy on the disaster recovery side of the house, because then our crew leaves C Street, goes back to their offices, and the operating administrations who have the responsibility for the impacted area go out and they start with their technical assistance and help them in the grant process. But it's not quite so neat. Everybody isn't sitting around the same bullpen. It's not so easy to go out and just touch the person that you need to coordinate with, and sometimes the connections haven't been made very well. So I can pick up the phone and call Herbie, and he was actually responding to email over the weekend, but that might not necessarily be the case when it's somebody that I don't have that same kind of relationship with. So I do want to tell you about two programs that you may not know about. MAP 21, Moving Ahead for Progress, was actually signed in July of 2012, so pre-Sandy. The Transit Administration picked up new authorities under that, which we were able to go ahead and apply for Sandy. The Highway Administration previously got some authorities in January of that same year, January of 2012. And I've highlighted exactly what you can do with both of these types of funding. What's important about these is that, like everything else, there are strings and rules attached. So, for example, Transit Administration, they were able to go ahead and give out about $2 billion that went out to not only the Metropolitan Transit Authority, but the New York City Department of Transportation, the Port Authorities for New York and New Jersey, as well as New Jersey Transit. $2 billion, nice chunk of change. That money was specifically targeted to get transit systems back up and running. But the rules are, like you heard about the block grants, Grants are only for expenses that are not reimbursed by any other program, especially FEMA. Grants are made under the program subject to terms and conditions that our secretary will determine based on the actual type of incident. More importantly, the monies have to be given by Congress. It's not like a pot that's sitting there. The money has to come in first, and then we can get it dispensed. Operating costs can start within 1 year of beginning on the date of the declaration, and it requires a declaration by either the governor or the president, and it can go for up to 2 years beyond that. There is a cost share. It's 80 Fed, 20 local. That cost share can be waived based on the circumstances. So a few strings. Highway Administration, they were able to contribute $224 million to New Jersey for Sandy-related repairs. Those monies, though, come out of the Highway Trust Fund. And if you've been reading the paper, you know that the trust fund's running out of money. So again, we're going to be faced with a situation where there may be a small pot, but that pot is diminishing, and we've had several recent big hits across the system. So it's a funding mechanism that will need to be explored a little bit more. Finally, the last piece that I want to let you consider is the Defense Production Act. So the Production Act is the President's primary authority to make sure that private sector resources can be used for national defense, and national defense is defined as military engagements for the purposes of energy, emergency preparedness under the Stafford Act, and protection and restoration of critical infrastructure. DOT has been delegated the civil transportation pieces of those. And again, it's two titles. Title I, which talks about acceptance and prioritization of contractors and orders, and Title VII of Section 708, which is voluntary agreements and plans for action for preparedness programs. So for public health and medical, oftentimes what that means is during response, we're doing things like moving people or moving patients to definitive care, and we did that during Haiti. That was really pretty easy, but when it was time to return them back, we had moved along the continuum into recovery, and those same kinds of actions weren't available to get the folks back out. So there is limited capacity within DOD is the primary mover for patient evacuation. There's some limited capacity. And previously, where we had had civilian partners that had signed up, those partners are now leaving the program, which means that we're going to drop back to only what DOD is able to do. And probably a little bit easier today as we wind down, but should defense actions be necessary outside of the country and those limited assets get reallocated back out, our ability to be able to do things here in the United States will become a little bit more difficult. So we're the federal government. We're here to help you. But I just don't have, I have my regulatory authorities, but I don't have anything in my toolkit that I can wrap my arms around and put into the fight.